The recording has started. And now I'll share the devotions for this morning. Okay, Connie.
Thank you. Let's take a moment to just breathe and prepare ourselves for the day. Holy God, holy and mighty, holy and immortal,
Have
have
mercy.
mercy. Our Father in heaven,
Hallowed be
hallowed be your name.
Your
Your
kingdom
kingdom come,
Your
your
will
will be done on earth as in heaven.
Give us
Give us
today
today our daily bread.
Forgive us
Forgive us our sins,
as we forgive those
who sin
who sin against us. Save us from the time of strife and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, God's only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried.
He descended
into the dead. On the third day he rose again.
He ascended
into heaven. He is seated at the right hand of the Father.
He will
And he will come to judge the living and the dead.
I
I
believe
believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life of everlasting. Amen. A reading from Isaiah, the 43rd chapter. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. A reading from Hebrews, the 11th chapter. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, and this, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Show us your mercy, O God.
And grant us your salvation.
Give us the joy of your saving help again.
and sustain us with your bountiful Spirit.
Give peace in all the world.
For
For only in you can we live in safety.
Keep the nations under your care.
And guide us in the way of justice and truth.
Let your way be known upon the earth.
Your saving help
among all nations.
Let not the needy be forgotten.
nor the hope of the poor be taken away.
Create in me a clean heart, O God.
And sustain
you with your
Holy Spirit.
Lord, hear my prayer.
Let my cry come before you,
The Lord be with you.
and also with you.
Let us pray. O God, you have called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you, Connie. Let's see. Welcome, everyone. Looks like Bill is still trying to get in. He hasn't quite got his camera, and I think he just backed out again. Try one more time. He'll make it eventually. Welcome to the transition training webinar that we're doing. This is the first time we've done this online, but then many of us are doing things online that we've never done before. And we see this as being a real advantage because, as I indicated earlier, we're recording these sessions, and that gives us a library of videos for this training, and that will be very helpful for us in interim ministry and in transition ministry. So thank you all for being a part of this and for being here today. Please mute yourself, as I mentioned earlier, except when you're going to speak. One of the things I want you to be aware of is that when the presenter is any presenter is doing a presentation, what really shows on the computer on the presenter screen is the presentation, the PowerPoint, and not much more, which means it's really going to be hard to see. If you have questions or comments, don't bother raising your hand because we may not see it. There's also an electronic hand in the list, but we won't see that either. That's what we're finding being part of the limitations of this particular platform. So what I'm saying to you is, if you have a question, unmute and butt in. We receive questions in a very welcome way, and want to be able to have a good dialogue. Each session, each presentation will have a discussion period within it, and we'll have a chance to bring things to the table to talk about at that time. And so just speak up as you have need. As I said earlier, I expect this session to be the shortest of the 5. I don't expect us to go all the way till noon. But more likely will be done by 11 today. One final thing is simply to remind you that in the email that I sent you last week with the materials to go with the week is an evaluation form. It's a fillable PDF form. Please take time after the end of this week to fill it out and email that back to me. I would appreciate it very much. The team does look over these, and we find all the evaluations very helpful. So that's pretty much where we are. What I'd like to do at this point is just to kind of go around the room, make sure everybody's got your grid view so you can see everyone in the room. And we're going to go around from person to person, and I'd like you to give me your name and your location. And if you're in a parish, tell us what parish you are in, and tell us something about how long you've been in ministry or how long you've been at your current assignment, and what it is that you expect to gain from the training. Most of you here today are here for the 5-day interim course. Tim Bernard is a new pastor in our synod, and he's going to be here for the first 3 days. And we welcome all of you to be a part of that. So let's start with Steve Kaufman. Unmute yourself and tell us about you, Steve.
All right, good to be unmuted. Yes, I've been in ministry 38 plus years. Recently retired. About a month ago, I guess 2 months ago, I retired, and a month ago, I took an interim assignment at Apostles Lutheran Church in Brandon. Very good to be a part of that, and I'm excited to learn more secrets of ministry in transition. I have a feeling, Tom, that we're all probably always in some kind of a transition, but that this is a special, the special focus, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Chris Todd.
Hi, I'm Chris Todd. I'm at Lord of the Seas Lutheran Church in Big Pine Key. I've been in ministry for 18 years. I've been at Lord of the Seas for 8. I'm going for the record for transitional ministry, I think.
I got that right.
So anyway, I guess I'm just trying to find out if there's anything new that I need to learn, and also to refresh things, because you know, after a while you start forgetting things, and sometimes you just need a refresher in the basics.
Right. Well, we're glad to have you here. And we're glad to be able to offer this platform with you being as far away as you are. This makes it a lot easier for you to attend.
Oh, yeah. Since my accent, my wife doesn't like me to drive long distances. So.
Yeah, right. So that works out really well. Ellen Cross.
Ellen Cross. I was ordained in '96, retired in 2016 because of health issues. I'm currently serving as interim at St. Matthew's in Jacksonville. I've been there, well, almost 2 years. And I need a refresher as well. You know, as Christopher said, you can forget things. But I'm interested in seeing, especially about the new opportunities with the transition seminars that you offer to the congregation, since we're at that point at St. Matthew's.
Okay. Very good. Dale Young. Unmute your mic. Yeah, move your cursor around and you'll see the mic icon at the bottom. It disappears when the cursor isn't moving. I wonder if I can do it from my end. There, I did it from my end. You're unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I can't see anybody. I just got kicked out completely off the screen.
Oh,
So I have no screen whatsoever of the grid. So I couldn't manipulate my mouse to get the mic on. Thanks for turning it on, and you can see me.
We can see you.
Interesting. All I see is a page that says start your meeting. Anyway, my name is Dale Young, and I'm at St. Timothy in Miami Gardens. I was ordained in 1979. I retired from many years of hospital chaplaincy, and this is my 11th interim.
Wow.
So I've taken the interim courses before, but I haven't for quite some time, and so I noticed that over the years, with each new bishop, there's a different emphasis and in what is required or expected of an interim, and so I need to get an update.
Yeah, very good. So if the button there says start your meeting, go ahead and start your meeting. See if it gets you back in.
Right, I'm going to try that. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Try that. Jeff Copeland.
I'm getting notices on my computer that the bandwidth is limited, so I'm a little cautious about how long we're going to last with this. I've been in doing transitional ministry now in the Episcopal Church in about 7 dioceses, from Missouri to the Northeast to the South. And I retired 2 years ago, and I'm failing retirement miserably. So it would be a real pleasure to be back doing transitional ministry, which is my passion.
Very good. That's nice to hear somebody say that. It's certainly a unique ministry.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So, and in terms of, I'm glad you raised the bandwidth issue. Video hogs up a lot of bandwidth, and during the presentations, if we're not doing discussions, if we're just having someone doing a presentation, you certainly are free to turn your video off, which would ensure that you're not going to get bumped. That would reduce your bandwidth, and then when we come into a discussion session, you can turn it back on and participate that way. That's just an FYI. And Dale, somehow you're in twice now. I don't know how you did that, but that's okay. Can you, Dale, are you able to see?
I'm hearing them. I'm hearing double. I don't know how to get out of the other one.
Yeah, and you're actually in twice. Let me bump out the one that's in and creating the problem.
I'm going to get out.
There.
Right.
There, and I've muted Dale on this end while he figures out his problems. Let's see, where am I? Janine Sweet.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I am retired from the Rocky Mountain Synod in Colorado, and I've been here a while now. I think I've been doing interims a little over 10 years. And I live in Lakeland, but the interim I'm doing now, I started about 4 or 5 weeks now, 6 weeks now, is Good Shepherd, Tampa.
It's the third time you've been there, I understand. I remember.
Yeah, I was there. We worked together. I was your staff for a while, then I did an interim, and now this is an interim.
Yeah.
And so I think this class will just pull together some a whole picture and then do some review kinds of things.
Sure.
So that's
It's interesting for us folks who've been in interim ministry for a while. We wind up seeing churches go off get a call and then come back into transition ministry and go off and then come back in again. We tend to see that, and sometimes we wind up going back to places we've been, which is fascinating. Bob McKibben.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Responded. I take it you can hear me okay.
We can.
And I have been chatting off and on with Bill as he's trying to get logged in. He's having some compatibility problems. Okay. And so he said he's going to just keep trying. Well, again, I'm Bob McKibben. I've at Messiah Lutheran in Panama City, Florida. And since we're in the central time zone, I hope you're done before noon, Tom. And,
you had to get up early.
Yes, sir. We for 35 years. I'm a retired United Methodist pastor. I've been helping out Messiah Lutheran since just after the hurricane, been in and out, and then officially the interim pastor for I guess it's been about the last 4 months.
Very good. And we're glad you're there. And we're also glad you could attend this webinar. You too are in one of the extreme parts of the synod up in the Panhandle up towards that direction. And I know this makes it a lot easier than traveling. So we're glad you could be here. Tim Bernard.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
I am at Trinity Lutheran Church in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. I've been a pastor for 25 years, and this is beginning my fourth call. I had one Sunday with the congregation before we closed the church building.
Yeah.
And so now we've been doing, as everybody else has pretty much, been doing things electronically. When we get back together, it's really going to be a time for, really getting to know the people face to face, as well as what is their passion for ministry, and kind of reinvigorate the congregation after this long lapse because of the COVID.
Right.
It could be much like a mission start, depending on how long these things goes on. So
you bet. That's an interesting insight. We have no idea how the church is going to come out of this in the end.
Right.
It's really quite something. So yes, I do hope to be able to give you some tools for that. Bob, you might want to suggest to Bill, if he's having trouble, first maybe try what Chris tried and reboot his computer, and then try to come in. And if that doesn't work, he may want to simply join by telephone. He can look at the videos later, but maybe between now and tomorrow, if the reboot doesn't work, then maybe that'll work for him to join us.
Thank you. I'll try to do that. I've been chatting with him when he's come in and out of the platform, but I'll try to figure out a way to get up with him.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Connie.
I can just send him a quick text.
Okay, why don't you do that? So that's those are the folks who are the registrants and attendees on the leader team. There are 4 of us. Richard Dow, you want to say hi? Say hey.
I'm unmuted. Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Good to be with you.
Richard, tell us how long you've been in ministry.
Okay. I was ordained in 1979 when the church was just coming out of the Roman Empire period. And I'm at Memorial in St. Augustine as a full-time pastor, and I was an interim there about 5 years or so ago. Having done 4 interims total and enjoying every one in a different way. Good morning.
Right. Thanks. Pam Wellers is our newest member on the leader team. We give Pam all the really good assignments.
Good morning. I can't see my face on this. Do you guys get to see your face in the gallery view?
It's my face is just kind of teeny down in the corner.
Okay, I'll have to scroll and see if it's like.
Is there a way to get more?
Of your face? You really want to see more of your face?
Jane wanted to know how to do gallery view.
Oh, the gallery view is up in the right. Move your icon, and when you do, move your cursor. When you do, all these things show up, and up at the top right, not the rightmost, which is the floating panel view, or the full screen view. You can click that, but right left of that is the if you put your cursor over that, the grid view is the 4 dots.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you find it, Pam?
No, it's okay. I didn't want to mess with it. It's all right.
Okay.
So I'm Pam, and I was ordained in '98, and I have served as a regular parish pastor, also have served as a hospital chaplain, and also have done a number of interims here in the Synod. So, yeah, and as there have been some challenging ones along the way.
There are some challenging assignments, yes. And she's really done a terrific job in every place she's been. She really has.
Thank you. That's kind.
So we're glad that she's part of our team. Connie Schmucker.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many people present today. And I know the virtual is a challenge. I myself spent probably about 15 hours in Zoom the last couple of days with candidacy committee. But after a while, it gets easier, and it's amazing how we can develop relationships. Not quite the same as sitting at the rocker at Luther Springs, but still we can accomplish a lot, and it's a good thing. So thank you for taking the time over the course of 5 days to spend a couple hours with us each day. And it's really important as part of the teams that we're all tracking in the same direction so that we have that cohesive nature. But also, as somebody mentioned, we're always in transition. And that's a gift we can share with one another as we share our experiences. Thank you, and look forward to the next couple days.
Thank you. And I'm Tom Weitzel. I kind of head up this motley crew and help Connie coordinate the transition ministry and keep all the interim pastors corralled as best we can. Although sometimes that's sort of like herding cats, but I've really enjoyed being a part of this leader team. We formed this team in 2011, and Connie came on in 2012 from the bishop staff. Connie's now been working through 4 different bishops, and they've all been wise enough to keep her on in her spot, and she's really been a terrific asset for the office of the bishop, and just really helpful for us in the leader team in coordinating training and mentoring. I became a parish pastor in 1987, and all of my parishes were transitions in one form or another. I spent about a 5-year period working on Bishop Benaway's staff doing communications, and then since that time I've been doing interim ministry since about 2006. Actually, since about 2004, even while I was on staff, I wound up doing an interim down at our church in the Bahamas while I did full-time in Tampa, which was crazy. It was just crazy nuts, but it wound up being a good situation for everybody. So that's kind of where we are. Let me begin this first presentation on the dynamics of transition. Does anybody have any questions before I begin? Okay, then I'm going to start that sharing. And we'll talk about this as I go through it. As I said, remember to just flag me verbally if you have a question or have a comment you want to share. Ministry and transition, what are the dynamics? This is a piece that both Rick Armstrong, who many of you know from Lutheran Counseling Service prior to his retirement, he still does things with them. He's an LCMS pastor, but been just very active in helping pastors and parishes in our synod, as well as the Florida, Georgia district churches. Transition, being in transition means that an ending has taken place and that there is a time in between before you get to a new beginning that has not yet taken root. Transitions are about this time in between. You might even call it the time on the way. How do we experience these times when we're in transition? Experiencing the time in between, for some, boy, it's a time of joyful anticipation and planning for the new thing to come. It's sort of like Advent in that regard, or maybe like pregnancy. You're expecting some great new thing to happen, or some exciting thing to happen. And so there's this joyful anticipation in what is coming. For others, it can be a period of anxiety and confusion. Boy, when we talk about this COVID situation as being a transitional time, we all have been experiencing, our parish folks, having this period of this sense of anxiety and confusion. And for that matter, even we ourselves, I think, have probably been touched by that. Others will experience the stages of grief during transition from the loss of a pastor. There's very traditional 5 stages of denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance, which we all know from having seen these for many, many years are not necessarily in order, but they happen when they happen, but seem to be a part and parcel of it, of grief. But in all cases, the time in between is a changing situation. What was normal has left the building, you might say. In other words, there was an ending of some sort. And what was normal is now changed, is now gone. And everything present is in a state of becoming prior to the new beginning. There is a transition in Scripture, a very famous one that you all know, the Exodus. The Exodus, when the Israelites were brought out of Egypt, that was certainly an ending of their slavery, and something of a beginning, a new beginning for them, being formed as the people of God. But during that wilderness wandering, there was a transition to get to the promised land. That was part of the promise in the covenant all along, which was going to be a new beginning. And so the wilderness experience itself was the transition for those people. For the people of God, the promised new beginning is always filled with hope that aids those in transition. The Hebrew word for wilderness is a really kind of interesting thing. Compliments of Frederick Niedner here, a professor at Valparaiso University. He says that Hebrew word for wilderness is a place apart from words, a place where words do not seem to work, a place where you can't quite say what it is. The in-between place is that place where we don't know the words yet to describe it, and we can't define for sure what it is. I think that's really an interesting thing to think about as you think about what we've been going through in this COVID time. It's such a constantly changing and morphing kind of thing, and yet we continue to be in that wilderness, and we aren't quite sure what it's all about at times. The wilderness in God's hands can be transformational. Transition times can be transformational, and that we definitely see as part of that scriptural wilderness experience. The transition is the transformation. The wilderness experience was a time of the reforming of the people of God as a people of God. It was a time for faith renewal, a time to really learn how to trust God. Transitions always push us there. How are we going to trust God, or will we trust God to see us through the transition, regardless of what that transition is going to be? Will we trust God, or will we somehow try to take that out of God's hands? It's a time for faith renewal. And it's also a time of testing of that faith. That surely is part of the story of the wilderness experience of the children of Israel. that it was a time of testing of their faith in the God who had brought them out of Egypt. The Israelites came out of that wilderness experience strengthened as a result of that, strengthened in their faith as God's people. So transition can be transformational, but it wasn't always easy. The experience of the wilderness for some in that story of the Israelites was about frustration and dissatisfaction. There was lots of complaining. That Exodus 17 passage surely is not the only passage in the story of the wilderness about the complaining of the Israelites. It seemed to be a constant complaining. There was an uncertainty about the future. There were periods of disillusionment with the leaders. There was a desire to go back to Egypt. Let's at least go back and have meat to eat. Remember that one. And yet, that's some of that desire to go back is a reckoning for some folks with the notion that the situation really has changed and they have not embraced it quite yet. There's certainly a denial aspect going on for some people.
I really see that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really see that it wasn't always easy, and all those bullet points are really outlining very well where many people are dealing with COVID right now.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah,
especially with a lot of leaders who, they just want to go back to the way things were. That pull is really strong. The uncertainty about the future, they're complaining, we're dissatisfied, we're frustrated. I mean, it's all of those things.
It is. Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just amazing comparing our current story with that story of the people of Israel. Yeah, you bet. And yet, at every turn in the wilderness, every turn with regard to the complaining, every turn in which there was a new need, God addressed the need. God addressed the need, and there are lots of samples, as the passages indicate, lots of examples where God addressed the need. When there was a need for water, there was water. When there was a need to sweeten the water, there was the sweetness of the water. When there was a need for food, there was manna. When there was a need for meat, there were quails. At every turn in the wilderness, God addressed the needs of the people. So following and trusting God got the Israelites through the uncertainty of the wilderness to the promised land, which again shapes this as a faith journey. Are we going to trust God? Are we going to lean on God for this journey and see that God brings us out whole and well at the end of the journey as we come back as we come into the promised land? This is an interesting graph. This is what transitions can look like. This is a very a typical illustration of what are called the phases of a disaster. And it's kind of interesting. We have previously in this training tended to see this in terms of what happens when a hurricane comes through. There's that pre-disaster period where there's the warning and the threat, and then there's this impact, and we have all these heroic things that happen as we try to begin a comeback, and there's something of a little bit, and there's a lot of community cohesion and something of a little bit of a honeymoon. And I'm thinking maybe even in this COVID thing, we might have had that in March for a week, maybe a couple. But then there comes this disillusionment that just kind of takes the disaster down and makes it even worse. And yet at some point it'll bottom out and people will come to terms and begin to work through their grief for what is lost. That grief thing keeps coming through. And there are anniversaries and trigger events of various sorts that remind us of what was until we finally come to a new beginning and reconstruction. You know, in a hurricane, this can be 1 to 3 days, or in a fire or some other kind of a natural disaster. And this period can be a whole lot longer. It can be years. You folks who were up in the Panhandle working after Hurricane Michael know that we're not done with the rebuild up there yet, and I'm sure Bob can speak to that. But it's kind of interesting to look at this in terms of the COVID thing, which is just, it's like this slow moving slug, if you will, that's taken months to go through this, and we haven't even gotten to the bottom of this one. Kind of curious. One person in seeing this this illustration was when Rick Armstrong was presenting it. Was a medical person, and she said how interesting that this mimics a heartbeat. You all notice that? This line mimics a heartbeat on a heart monitor, which is kind of a curious thing to think about, and to see as part of the phases of a disaster. That's one form. Another form here. You've got something of a cyclical nature when it comes to transitions. You've got a period. It starts with a period of contentment wherever you are, and then something happens that initiates the transition. After which there's some folks who just really have struggles in dealing with. They just don't want to deal with the transition itself, and will deny it perhaps. And then they become a little bit confused because they have to confront the denial, and it just keeps rolling along until finally there's some awareness and renewal takes root, and it brings us back to that period of contentment again. But we don't stay there very long before another transition comes along. This is life, is it not? This is life. Transitions are circular, and it's kind of interesting thinking about Janine Sweet, who's now been at Good Shepherd 3 times over about a 10 to 12 year period. So yeah, these things are cyclical. So I'd like to have us talk a little bit about a time when maybe you've been through a good transition in your life, and how this transition actually was a good transition. Let me take the sharing off, and come on, hide, darn you. There we go. Stop sharing. Now, has everybody got the grid view back again? Good. So somebody want to start us off? Tell us about a time that you experienced a good transition in your life, whether it's either in ministry or personally. Somebody had a good transition, and tell us what made it good.
There's two things that make transitions, good or bad.
Yeah.
If it's good, it's something I chose. If it's bad, it's something somebody else imposed on me.
Oh, is that how you've had it?
Transitions I've had. Yeah, when I choose them, they're really good. When somebody else chooses them for me, they're bad.
Yeah, it can happen that way. It can happen that way. Somebody else. Anybody else have a good transition they can think of in their life?
I would say going into the ministry. This is something I had wanted to do for a long time and had been waylaid by, family and, and career and stuff like that. And it kind of came at me sideways, and I didn't anticipate it. But and I was thinking, I like what she said about, it's when you make a choice. And when I would say another thing is that a good transition is when you see all these possibilities, all these different things. Things are new, and you can come up with different approaches and different possibilities. And a bad transition is where a lot of your possibilities are cut off, and you only have you're trying to figure out the lesser of two or three evils.
Yeah, right. Sure. Very good.
I can think
Anybody else
of,
have it?
yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things for me anyway that makes for a good transition is a good ending. Being able to say goodbyes in healthy, open, honest ways, setting boundaries that, no, I'm not going to be able to, attend the next wedding or funeral or whatever, setting those boundaries, making those clear right from the very beginning. And
Sure.
that really helps the transition.
Very good. Very good.
I think of a couple things. One would be a transition from being a young lad at home to a college student, and all that meant. That was a pretty positive time for me. Had a good college experience. I then got married. That was a good transition and
Sure.
a healthy one, and I'm still married to that same woman, and pretty happy about that. So that was a good one. More recently, and one that I'm really experiencing that's been a challenge, my daughter has had cancer. And that is certainly not something we chose. And we are in the middle of that kind of a transition, as well as the COVID thing, dealing with her situation with her family and her treatment, her surgery and treatment and follow-up. So that's required us to recognize that it's not always as smooth as it's been with our family. And she lives a ways off. So yeah, I think we're right. Sometimes it's what we choose, and certainly the end has some kind of information about what kind of transition it was. When you're kind of in the middle of it, it's kind of up in the air sometimes.
Yeah, you got that right. Yeah, you bet. So let's come at it. Somebody else?
Yeah, I would personally say that I don't respond well to someone telling me what I need to do to change. And I apply that to ministry. People respond, and I've found people respond in a very negative way when they are under the impression you're there to do something to them rather to do something with them.
Yeah.
I respond very well when someone says to me, "Well, I'd like to walk with you," and we'll explore this territory together, and we're without the certainty of knowing how it'll also, and perhaps we'll find something wonderful at the end.
Yeah. Good. Let's take it from the other side. Bad transitions. Some of you have hinted at that a little bit, but tell about a bad transition that happened in your life and what made it bad.
Talking to me?
Anybody?
I can go.
Yeah, Dale.
Transition from mission development in Chile after 6 years of developing a church and building a church and ministries in Pinochet's dictatorship, which was very precarious, and I ended up doing a lot of things that brought death threats to me, and the church decided rather than have a martyr, they would pull me out. So when I came back to the U.S., I had difficult years of transition because I was LCA when I went in. overseas. When I came back, LCA was no longer
Right.
ELCA. And so my portfolio was switched to western part of Wisconsin rather than Milwaukee, where I had my first parish. And so where was I? And I needed some transition time, so I went to, I wanted to have a bilingual ministry because I had just spent 6 years doing worship in Spanish. So there wasn't much to offer in Wisconsin, so I went to California. I went to Berkeley to Lutheran School of Theology to do a semester there, and then made myself available for doing ministry in a bilingual situation. Nothing happened. For a year, nobody interested. Everybody was in transition. The ELCA was in transition. They didn't know what the budgets were looking like. So California wasn't working out. I had a sister in Miami. She said, "Why don't you come out here?" So I came to Miami, checked in with the Synod, said, "Here I am, available. Anything Hispanic or bilingual related here." And the response basically at that time, that was in 1980, not 88. The response was, "Well, get in line. There's 40, 50 pastors from Minnesota and North Dakota want to come and retire to Florida, so get in line." So there was nothing. And I went about 3 years, almost 3 years. And by then you lose your ordination. And in the meantime, I had met a pastor, a chaplain, and I was volunteering to do to visit AIDS patients at Jackson Memorial. And the chaplain there said, "Well, the Lutherans may not need you, but we sure do. So how would you like to do a CPE?" So they gave me a scholarship to do a full year of CPE so that I could actually be there in the hospital. And then they gave me the AIDS unit because I was the only chaplain there that spoke Spanish. So then I got a phone call. Somebody from a parish said, "We heard you're Lutheran and we need somebody to do pulpit supply. Can you come and so one thing after the other led to a call to the bishop from the head of the congregation that said to the bishop, "We want Dale Young as our interim." And the bishop said, "Well, who is he?" Send him over for an interview. So anyway, I ended up about 1 month before my ordination would have expired. I got a call to ministry, so that kept me in the ELCA.
Wow.
That was and then by then I had finished my year of CPE.
Right.
And the CPE supervisor got a call from Miami Children's Hospital, said they were looking for a bilingual pastor, and they had interviewed like 70 people, and they couldn't find somebody who was both Spanish speaking and CPE trained. And I went over, interviewed, and they hired me, and I was there for 6 years. So that was a rough transition. But
boy, it's probably years long.
Yeah, got me into a new ministry. And then I stayed in hospital ministry until I retired, basically. In the meantime, I did these interims for Lutheran parishes in the area.
Yes. We've been glad to have you down there for quite a while. Yeah. Thank you. Other experiences of bad transitions? Anybody else?
Yeah, for me, it was the health issues that forced me to retire a little bit before I wanted to. And that's got to do with, somebody said that a bad transition is when your possibilities get cut off. So dealing with the limitations the transition isn't completely over yet. So I have those good days when it's okay, this is the way it is, you're going to be fine. you do what you can do, that kind of thing. And then there are other days when I still kind of rail against not being able to do full-time ministry and that kind of thing. Or right now I've got some really bad problems with my back. Some days I can't stand in the kitchen and cook dinner and that kind of thing. So it's been a bad transition, although I can't say that any transition for me has ever been completely bad. Because it forces me, even when I go kicking and screaming, which is a lot, it forces me to pay attention to what God's trying to teach me.
Sure.
And it also forces me into trusting that, God's got it in hand. Just do the best you can.
Sure.
God is giving you today. So I can't ever say that every, a bad transition is never 100% bad for me.
Very good. Very good. By golly, Bill Knott has made it in and has a mic. He hasn't muted, but he has a microphone on my list. Welcome, Bill.
It's so good to be here. Finally.
We're glad you made it. You're so dedicated and work so hard to get in, and we're just glad you're here.
Bill, I missed you saying not here.
No.
Not here. Okay. Very good. I noticed when Ellen was talking, Chris Todd's head was bobbing up and down. He can certainly relate. He's had some health issues to deal with these last several years. Chris, you want to speak to that?
Well, yeah. 4 years ago, I was in a pretty bad car accident and broke both legs, both wrists, sternum, 6 ribs, collapsed a lung, tore up a whole bunch of internal organs. So that was quite a transition there. And I was pretty much out of commission. I was 40 days in the hospital, 100 in rehab, learning to walk again, and out of being able to do any ministry for about 8 months. And then I was able to eventually get back in. I had to get the doctor to say, and I had been attending both of my churches and worshiping and trying to say, when I finally got to okay, I think I can do this, I got pushback from a lot of people. And I said, look, I've been doing half of the liturgy from this side of the communion rail. It's not that hard for me to do the other part of the liturgy, the other side. And as long as I can sit down, so I was like, I can do all things in Christ as long as I'm sitting down. So anyway, yeah, that was interesting. I really did identify with Ellen thing about having your good days and your bad days, because right now, I'm dealing with, for the last 2 years, something which was probably what they call chronic fatigue syndrome. Haven't been formally diagnosed, but they basically do it by eliminating everything else, and they pretty much eliminated everything else. And yeah, you have good days and bad days, and it humbles you. It makes you realize that everything can be taken away from you at any time, and that the psalm about not trusting in your own strength, yeah, it's not guaranteed to you. So yeah, you have good days, and I'm like her. When I have a good day, I try to do as much as I can, and when I don't, you just have to. It's like surfing. You just kind of have to go with it,
right?
And hunker down and wait until you're feeling better again. And I'm just trying to make it really the next 2.5 years, when I will finally hit my 20 years on my pension with the Episcopal Church, and then retire. But
right.
And ironically, doing all of my services, this is my little studio, doing all of my services from home actually helps me conserve energy. I don't have to get up and move from one church and go to the next. I just get up and change stoles.
Yeah, right.
For the ones that the ones that the Episcopalians made me to the ones that the Lutherans made me.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's interesting. Very good.
All you can see is this part of me. So, you know.
Yeah, right. That works.
Yeah. So, anyway, but yeah, that was not a great transition. But the thing to do is to realize that you can either, you know, rage against fate, or you can say, well, what can I learn? You know, what can I learn from this? There's a saying out on the internet, supposedly Nelson Mandela, as with all quotes on the internet, you can't tell who really said it, but it's like, I never lose. I either win or I learn something. And I found that to be a really good way of approaching situations. It's adverse. Well, what can I take out of this? You know, like
very good. Very good. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint and draw some things together with this. We talked about the good transitions. We talked about the bad transitions. The challenge in a congregation, going into a congregation, is that not everybody's going to be experiencing the transition in the same way. You're going to have different people at different places. Some of them seeing a transition after a pastor has left, or even as a new one has arrived, as being a good transition, while somebody else thinking it's a bad transition. People experience transitions differently, and as the pastor, you're going to have to deal with all of that, and that sure has been coming out, as I'm sure you've experienced that as you've been dealing with the COVID situation in your congregations. It's just amazing to see where different people are with these things. What you can encounter within a transition, one of the things is homeostasis. All groups form patterns and systems of interaction over their time together. Homeostasis is the effort to keep the system consistent without change. Hold it. Don't anybody do anything. Don't change. It's that resistance to move. Transitions challenge consistency by their very nature, because normal left the room. Remember that part of the presentation? Normal has left the room. We already changed. So there is no staying the same. We're shoved along whether we're ready or not. Change began when something ended. So that begins to speak against those who would try to keep it the same. You're also going to run into. Yes, you can go ahead.
Yes, Dale. When I first started doing interims, the mandate was don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
Do worship. Keep things. Don't make any changes. No initiatives. No new ministries. Just that would be the homeostasis part. So somewhere along the line, that model.
Interim ministry has changed enormously over the last number of decades that many of us have been in ministry. There was that time when it not only don't rock the boat, but your prime mandate was hold the fort. Hold the fort. That means no changes. But ministry in transitions at this point, people really come to appreciate that the interim time, any transition time offers opportunities, much as Ellen, you and Chris both were speaking to. We can either resist what's going on and cry in our prayers to high heaven as to why this is happening to you, or we can settle down and ask the question, so what is God trying to teach me in this situation? You bet. It's much different. Interim ministry is much different these days.
30 years ago, it used to be very much a medical model. You went in and you said, I'm here to fix a problem.
Yeah.
What's your psychosis? Let's fix your psychosis. That model has shifted very heavily in the last 10 years.
You bet. It's that's true too. Thanks, Jeff. Another thing you're going to encounter in any ministry is triangulating. Triangulating is an ongoing cycle of interactions that always involves three people, often arising out of conflict or foiled expectations. Triangulating offers a means of deflecting or detouring and lowering the intensity in a conflict. Triangulating also offers a way not to confront problems and disappointments. When people really can't talk to each other, but they have to talk through another person, and often it's the pastor that gets drawn into the triangle. It just doesn't help. It just doesn't help at all. And so getting one-on-one conversation is the beginning to lowering intensity and confronting problems. And actually finding creative solutions. Helpful for transitions.
Can I just add again?
Sure.
I want to
Go
say
ahead.
something about that. It can be more than a person. It can be a group. I mean, I've had triangulation between choirs and boards, and
Good point.
it can be groups of people that get up in triangulations too.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. It can. Helpful for transitions. Know and define yourself. Boy, if you don't know yourself and can't define yourself, then you're just going to be, people are going to see that and go right for it. You need to be comfortable with yourself, know yourself, define yourself, be comfortable with yourself. You need to find some sort of balance between thinking and feeling, which sometimes can be tricky. You can't just react to situations with feelings. You need to think your way through them. You need to state your own thoughts out front, as well as your feelings, and invite others to do the same. That helps to deal, it helps to lower intensity, it seems to me, if we can encourage that kind of sharing and don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions or speak for others or blame others. That isn't helpful. It's not going to get you moving forward, and it's not going to help the transition. Expect to be challenged. Every transition, I mean, Moses got it. We saw that in the wilderness story. Moses was constantly challenged, but really understand it for what it is. What it is a changing situation in the state of becoming something else, because we're heading for the promised land. We're heading for a new place and a new phase in what God is unfolding for us. So it's in a state of becoming, and we don't quite yet know what that may be. So we need to make sure that we stay in touch, keep the vision, stay the course, those kind of focus kinds of things. And I think that, that's especially pertinent to what we're experiencing with this COVID situation. We've heard, certainly, we've been at this long enough that we've been hearing in news reports and TV and radio reports that it's just not going to be the same when we get to the end of this. The whole world is going to be different. And we don't quite yet know what that different is going to look like. And in particular for the church, what's it going to mean? That's part of the transition. We're still in that state of becoming. But if we keep in touch with folks, keep a unity through the efforts that you make, keep the vision, be the same person you've always been, stay the course. It really is helpful for transitions. The pastor at that point can be a really important, not only important leader, but something of an anchor that keeps it all from going a little crazy at times. And I think that's a really important role for us as pastors in transitions.
Tom, can I give you a Yogi Berra quote?
Yeah.
It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future.
Yeah. Yeah. You betcha. Yeah. You betcha. In any transition, this one in particular. But yes, it is. Yeah, very good. It's very helpful to know where the boundaries are. You need to know where we begin and end, and where others begin and end, and where our responsibilities begin and end. That's a part, it's another form here. It's another way of saying know yourself and know what your job is and what your job isn't. Um, one of the things that's often been challenging for pastors, I think, is to recognize what my job is as one who is called by God, and what God's job is that isn't necessarily my job. My job is bringing the word, instilling faith, but it's not my job to build the faith. That's God's job. So it's helpful in those kinds of ways to know what the responsibilities are and where the boundaries are, especially when you're working with groups.
Tom, it's Janine.
Yeah, Janine.
I would just like to comment. One of the ways that's been really helpful, I got this from Alban Institute, about keeping the boundaries, is that and when I need to step back, I just think of myself as the coach.
Sure.
And all of that, all of coaching, what coaching entails. And when you think about the role of a coach, that has been so helpful to not get emotionally involved and to be open to God's will and still be able to give directions and hopes for people. Just an insight that I had.
That's really good. I like that. That's really good.
There are some of my friends who would say, who've been doing transitional ministry for the longest time, is that boundary issues are one of the major issues surrounding transitions.
Sure,
you know that you encounter, and I would vouch for that as well. That issues of boundaries and lack of boundaries in parishes has been one of the major concerns for demise of many parishes.
Well, it's certainly been at the root of a lot of conflict that's occurred, especially between the pastor and a congregation, or a pastor in a particular portion of a congregation,
or the congregation and a bully.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another good example. Yeah, you bet. It reminds me of, especially this boundaries thing. It reminds me of Kenneth Houck's book that came out in the late 70s, I think 79, Antagonists in the Church. And one of the things that he says in there, he puts it forth as a major principle: don't feed the alligators. I mean, we ought to know this as Floridians. Don't feed the alligators is a major thing there. Just because the bully's making all the noise doesn't mean you need to give them the platform to stand up and be a bully. Knowing boundaries.
There's another really interesting book called "Never Call Them Jerks."
That's an interesting title.
Yeah, and it's around here somewhere. I'll see if I can dig it out. I can't remember who wrote it.
And
but it's really quite good.
The intended audience for reading is pastors, or
yes, the intended audience for reading is pastors.
Wow, that's quite a title.
Yeah, I've read that one too. That is a very good book. Very good. He bases a lot of it on Jesus's advice when your brother is, when you have something in your brother and you meet with him alone to try to resolve it, and then if you can't do that, then you try to bring in just a small group of people, etc. Before he says one of the problems is we tend to short circuit, and we have a problem. We take it to everybody, and especially the person with whom we have the problem. It's a very good book. I'm thinking another thing about boundaries and knowing where our responsibilities begin and end is to be able to sort of triage or prioritize in every transition. I think people sometimes get the idea that, well, then everything's going to change. Well, no, not everything.
Yeah.
You know? So to figure out what are the things that are not going to change, what must change, and then the things that you're just going to have to look at a case by case basis, and sort of triage the situation. So you're not like this. Yes, this must change. We don't have to deal with this. I think the problem is that people are afraid that like nothing will be the same. No, some things will, but some things have to change. And if you kind of can communicate that, it can calm people's fears because they think you're just going to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
I will sometimes say to them, if you want to keep your core values, once you know what they are, what has to change? And if you don't want to change, which of your core values do you want to get rid of?
Yeah, that's a good statement. Yeah, that's quite something. Very good.
And the core values, the keeping our eyes on the mission, is I think what you're saying is that in and of itself sets boundaries and helps kind of realign.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Also helpful for transition, state and publish expectations. Communicate. When you get it out there, at least people know what to expect. Part of the problem that you have is that not all things can be anticipated or expected. But as these things become, as you become aware of them, communicate them. Get it out there. Communicate as you're able and do it widely. That's also really helpful. That still doesn't mean everybody's going to come along at the same pace at the same time. I've certainly found that. There was one parish assignment I had at one point where they just really didn't want to grapple with the idea that their pastor had left. Their pastor of 18 years had retired, and I went in September, and still in March, there were folks who just didn't get that Normal had gone out with the last pastor. And so that made even communicating as much as I communicated, didn't quite get it. Until, frankly, I developed this PowerPoint. And this PowerPoint wound up being very helpful for that congregation.
That about communication is extremely important. I just thought of a bad transition that I went through I hadn't thought of because it was in my former career in radio. And when the radio station was bought out and we had new owners, and what I learned is that because the new owners were not communicating, people want to know. They don't like uncertainty. And if you don't communicate fully and a lot, that's how rumors get started.
You got that right.
Innuendo and conspiracy theories, etc. People are picking little bits of information that they can glean, and then they are creating these things. And so, the important thing is to communicate every little thing that you can think of so that you can quash the rumors and the people panicking over stuff that's not in fact going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
If they don't know, they make it up.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's part of the problem. And we've seen it in this COVID situation. We've seen it across the nation. When there isn't information, people begin to fill in the blanks by themselves, and it's not always been helpful. For interim pastors, we've got a transition manual that keeps growing. It's now about 180 pages, and but it's got a lot of really significant stuff in there. And it says in section 2, page 2, that during the transition time, a congregation can reflect, renew, grow, and learn about itself. It is a time to be doing that, reflecting on where they've been, what it's been like with the ministry that they've most recently had, or even before that, what's it been like? Anniversaries come around on a regular basis, and that gives some opportunity for reflecting. But also a time based on that reflection to renew in faith. We saw within that wilderness experience in Scripture that was a time of testing of faith and growing of faith. Well, transition times need to be a faith time and a renewal time, a time to grow and learn, and to learn not only about themselves as a congregation, but to learn about their relationship with God. Rather, it continues in the manual, rather than simply a time to put everything on hold, the transition time is an opportunity for the congregation and interim pastor to do many things in preparation for the start of a new pastor's ministry. That alone says a change may need to happen in order to really facilitate the next phase of ministry that's before us. So you've got it within the manual to, and you want to make sure that if change is going to happen, you anchor it in this area. If there's change, you want to anchor it with the idea of preparing for the start of the next ministry. What can we do to facilitate the next phase of the ministry of the church? So the interim goal, therefore, as far as the manual is concerned, is to prepare for that start of a new ministry. And by implication, it also says we got to be ready to be interviewed by pastoral candidates. It's kind of curious that churches who lose their pastors and enter into a transition process, they quickly understand that they're going to be going through interviews with a new candidate and several candidates, and they get all excited about all these pastors we get to look at and all this paperwork we get to look over. But they tend not to think about the fact that the pastor's looking them over. Are we ready to be looked over? Do we have our house in order? Or are there some changes that may need to be made? Are all things in good order and ready to be seen by candidates? Are we ready to for what it means to be interviewed by candidates? There are some preparations and changes that may be needed. And this is all part of that idea of reflect, renew, grow, and learn. The interim pastor will help leaders to assess during this period attendance trends, finances, and stewardship. There is an early interim assessment tool for that purpose. Also to assess congregational participation and attitudes, leadership, personnel, and organizational needs, for which there's also a ministry sustainability tool that's part of the manual. There are spiritual needs and ministry needs. You'll be assessing all of those as an interim pastor. For those of you who are, well, and even in new calls, you're going to want to assess all these same things. What's the situation in which you're walking into? You want to know these things. Are all things in good order and ready to receive a new pastor? And for that new pastor, did all these things get done, or did something get left undone? You want to look at all of those. For all transitions, remember that no matter what happens, we will be okay. That's a faith statement. We are safe in our relationship with God through faith in Christ Jesus, says Paul in his letter to the Romans, chapter 8. No matter what happens, we will be okay. All right, thoughts, comments, questions about this beginning for our transition training?
Steve Kaufman.
Yeah, Steve
Kaufman. Yeah, I'm curious. It's never good to make assumptions, but on the other hand, is there not some inclination sometimes that what we are getting into in a particular interministry may be more foiled or more distressed than other situations? And I guess what I'm trying to figure is when somebody says this has been a good situation you're getting into, what assumptions do I need to be careful not to make, or is it safe to say, you know, I'm getting into a situation here where there may not be a whole lot of adjustment that's necessary? You get the nature of my question? I'm not sure if I'm.
Just let me begin to answer it, and the answer may tell you whether I've gotten your question right or not.
Okay.
I remember one particular assignment that I had in which the information that the office of the bishop had about the congregation was all very good, and I was expecting to go into a situation that was fairly stable and had no real problems. And it didn't take long before I found out that was completely wrong. And that is to say to all of you who are interim pastors, the office of the bishop counts on you being the boots on the ground to really tell us whether what we've known before is fully accurate or not, or whether the last pastor was blowing smoke and not really giving us the full view of what was going on. It's a given. This is an assumption. It's a given that pastors certainly don't want to have themselves viewed as being poor or bad in their ministry, and so one is likely to report about oneself in better ways than in not so good ways. And so that perhaps colors what reports do go into the office of the bishop about a congregation. And that's one of the reasons we provide that early assessment tool, is so that you can begin to look at the facts and as well as essentially taking the temperature of the congregation to see what's going on. On the other hand, if there's some real conflict going on in a congregation, you may not completely see it until you've been there for several months and really gotten to know folks. It could take 3 to 6 months to find something. And in one particular parish situation I was in, and many of my assignments tend to be longer assignments because they're tough situations in which we really want to do some intentionality in direction and direction setting. And I remember one situation, I was there for 1.5 years before some piece of information came out that was really critical and really changed our view about what had happened in that parish. And so we count on you telling us what's going on. I try to go in with a blank slate in my head. Yes, you'll hear some sense of it from Connie based on what she's known and the relationship she's had with the outgoing pastor. And maybe you will have heard some things from the outgoing pastor too. Take everything with a grain of salt. Go in and make your own assessment. Connie, you wanted to say
That's
something?
exactly the question I asked Tom. Thank you. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Connie?
Right, thank you. In working the process, if you will, that helps to take some of the emotion and pointing of fingers out of the situation, by just taking one step at a time and taking a look at all the different corners of the ministry that you've got before us. Because as Tom said, there's been several times when we've entered into a process thinking everything was hunky-dory, and in just going through the steps of the process, things began to be revealed. And so by doing that, it's nothing more than getting your house in order and being faithful to God's call. What's God calling? Where is God calling the congregation? And it takes it off of the blame game, if you will.
Yeah, I remember one surprising situation where I for several months in a row, I kept sending email reports to both Connie and the bishop as to what I was discovering that we all just plain didn't know. And the conference on ministry that particular year, Bishop Schaefer came up to me and said, every time I see that I have an email from you, I shudder. Sometimes it's like that, but there is a congregational folder in the office in Tampa, and we need to make sure that it's accurate and really telling the story of what's going on, including the struggles that are there. So we count on you to fill in the information. Other questions, comments?
In both the parishes that I was were dreadful transitions. In both those parishes, there were major secrets that had been withheld for years.
Sure.
And those secrets had a devastating effect on me as the new pastor. They were withheld from me for the longest time, and they affected every aspect of ministry. And I at that time in ministry, as a young guy, ill-defined young guy when I knew everything.
Right, remember?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. Literally didn't know what to do. I mean, as a young ordained fellow, in a couple of parishes where these secrets were being hidden, well, in case which the previous pastor was a child abuser.
That's a whole system of secret keeping.
Absolutely, and we had Boy Scout troops. Guess who got nailed? I mean, it was all, and all that stuff never got revealed until many, many years later. In that instance, and in the other instance, I was a second choice, and that became, the folks who wanted to be the second choice. They made my life miserable for the whole period of time I was there. So the secrets sometimes can be those things that get in the way. And I now have a term I use because I used to coach clergy too. I said, well-defined clergy find well-defined parishes. And well-defined parishes, and I use this when I'm doing interim ministry, folks, encouraging them to be as well-defined as they can. Well-defined parishes nearly always find well-defined clergy who can help them go to where they want to go. And the converse is also true. Having been for a period of time in my early ministry, one of those really poorly defined clergy who always seemed to end up in the really poorly defined parish, which didn't always work well. So I could tell the stories that are associated with the poorly defined, and I can also affirm those stories I can tell about people and clergy and parishes who have taken the time to know their boundaries, to have defined who they are, to be clear about who they are, and those ministries begin to take off when the pastor and people get together. It's fun to watch.
The counter to that, though, is the fact that we will often know of situations that are tough situations, challenging situations, where you have that either secret keeping going on or something bad has happened and we know what it is, or maybe we don't know what it is, but we see the end results being problematic for the congregation, and we know we need to confront it. Is that the pastors who are sent into those situations know that up front, and they darn well better have their own boundaries in place and their self-definition in place, because you are going to be attacked, and it's going to be really a very, very challenging situation to stand firm and help that congregation to begin looking at itself, and it will take some time. It will take definitely some time before the congregation will be ready to trust you and ready to be willing to do that. Which is why we will expect from the start that this is not going to be a quick 9-month to 18-month interim. It's going to probably be more like a couple of years, but we usually know that ahead. Connie?
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on that. When the interim pastor comes in, we make a note that, they shouldn't come in and just change things willy-nilly, so to speak. And there are times that you will have to change things, but not unilaterally, in conjunction with the council and in conversation. And we've had a couple situations where some of our own ELCA pastors have come from former church bodies. And most recently, the pastor had been hands off on all of the finances and administrative matters, but yet the checklist was being filled out. And so towards the end, I discovered that had been happening. And in his former church body, the pastor tended to the spiritual, and later the congregation tended to the earthly. So that was a shift in his thinking and in my thinking. And oh my goodness! And then in another situation, the chair of the call committee sent out this survey that actually was pulling the congregation backwards and undoing the work of the retreat that they had done. And the pastor called me and said, "What do I do? This is taking us backwards." And I said, "You talk with the person and share that perspective with them." And so I got a call later in the day and said, "Oh, thank you for that." But the interim pastor knew where the boundaries were. The interim pastor knew that this was pulling them backwards and undoing some of the progress. And all it took was that undoing that triangle, right, where the pastor went back to the person doing it. So I guess what I'm addressing is basically relationship. There's a job that you have to do. You've got to start with building that relationship, but from there you can work together. And I know many of you know that, but it's just so important. I wanted to bring it up again, and I heard it kind of playing around in the conversation that was taking place.
Thank you. Other comments, questions about the dynamics of transition? I think that's about all that we're going to do for today. And did I not say I thought we'd be done by 11? We're just pretty much on it.
You're done, man.
I'm really pleased with how this first session has gone. I trust that at the next session, you'll be able to connect a little better. Bill Knott, if you want to hang on, I'll chat with you and make sure that you're connecting okay. And if I can help with that, I'll be happy to do that. But for the rest of us, 9 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning. Go in peace, serve the Lord.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.